He had signed billion-dollar deals without blinking, fired board members without a tremor, and built an empire on logic colder than marble. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared CEO Adrian Blackwell for the trembling little girl tugging his coat in the quiet hospital corridor. Her voice barely a whisper as she held out a folded paper like it was the last precious thing she owned and asked, "Can you read this letter? It's very important." He had come here because his company funded the children's wing, and his assistant insisted he show face for press goodwill. But the cameras had packed up. The nurses had moved on, and he stood alone now in a place where beeping monitors and soft cries replaced the noise of boardrooms, where hope fought its battles in the scent of antiseptic and faint lavender. And as he looked down at her, frail frame, pale cheeks, brave smile hiding exhaustion, his heart, long buried under steel ambition, stirred painfully. She climbed back onto her bed with shaky legs and patted the seat beside her like she was inviting him into a secret world. And he, Adrian Blackwell, untouchable titan of finance, sat without hesitation, suddenly feeling like a giant afraid to break something delicate, his throat tightening when he saw her name bracelet, Lila James, age 7. She pushed the letter into his hand, crumpled edges, smudged marker hearts, and he exhaled slowly before opening it, expecting childish scribbles, but instead reading words that sliced through him like glass. "Dear Daddy, please don't cry when I go to sleep forever. I know you try to be strong, but your eyes tell secrets your heart can't hide. I don't want to leave you, but Mommy needs me in heaven. She said we will watch over you together. I hope you find someone who will hug you when I'm gone. Someone who will remind you to smile again. I'm not scared, Daddy, because angels don't get sick. And Mommy promised she will hold my hand. Please don't be alone. Please live. Please laugh sometimes. I'll be waiting at the rainbow." Adrian's hands shook, vision blurring as the words bled into each other. Because he had seen reports, he had donated millions, yet none of it ever felt real until this moment when innocence, love and death sat in a child's handwriting. And he read slower, voice breaking as he finished her final line. "Daddy, I picked this man to read my letter because he looks lonely too. Maybe you can help each other when I'm gone." Silence filled the room like a living thing, heavy and aching. And for the first time in years, Adrian couldn't hide behind power or control, because a dying child had seen through him in seconds, seen the loneliness he buried under success. And when he looked up, Lila was staring at him with those big, tired eyes, searching his face like she needed him to promise her the impossible. And his voice was raw when he asked, "Where is your dad?" The nurse quietly answered, "He stepped out to cry. He doesn't want her to see." And that single sentence cracked something deep inside him. He had just lost his own mother to cancer months ago and hadn't cried once, telling himself grief was weakness. Yet here was a father breaking in secret while a child comforted him. And before he could stop himself, Adrian reached for Lila's tiny hand, shocked by how light and fragile she felt. And she smiled, small and brave, whispering, "I picked you because you look like someone who knows how to fix hearts." And he almost laughed at the irony because he didn't even know how to fix his own. She leaned her head on his arm like she had always known him and murmured, "Please don't let my daddy be alone." And in that moment, something fundamental shifted. This wasn't business, wasn't charity, wasn't reputation. This was humanity, raw and urgent, and he nodded firmly, swallowing the storm inside as he whispered, "I promise." Just then the door opened, and a broken man stood there, unshaven, red-eyed, hands shaking from grief and helpless love, and when his gaze fell on Adrian reading the letter, tears welled again. But Lila smiled weakly and whispered, "Daddy, he's going to help us." And Adrian stood, walked to the father, and without thinking, pulled him into a quiet, fierce embrace. Two strangers bound by a child's last wish, both shaking as the father sobbed into his shoulder, whispering, "I don't know how to let her go." And Adrian finally let his own tears fall, because he knew exactly what it meant to lose the only person who made you feel human. There was no press here, no audience, no business advantage, just a little girl who had seen pain and still chose kindness, a grieving father learning to say goodbye, and a CEO realizing that all the wealth in the world meant nothing if it couldn't heal a shattered heart. And when Lila whispered one last fragile request, "Come back tomorrow. Bring a smile," Adrian nodded, knowing this tiny girl had changed the course of his life forever. Because some promises aren't made in boardrooms. They are made beside hospital beds with shaking hands, broken hearts, and the soft voice of a child teaching a lonely billionaire how to feel again. He returned the next morning before sunrise, a coffee in his hand for the grieving father, a small stuffed unicorn for Lila. He had stood in the toy aisle at 2 a.m. like a lost child, unsure what comfort looked like but desperate to bring something that felt like hope. And when he walked into her hospital room, he saw fairy lights strung weakly around her bed, a handmade paper crown on her head, her tiny chest rising with more effort than yesterday. Yet she still smiled, a soft flicker like a candle fighting wind, whispering, "You came, and you brought your smile." And he realized she remembered everything, every promise, every emotion. And before he could speak, she pointed to a chair taped with glitter stars that read, "Reserved for Mr. Fixheart." And he sat, trying to hold himself steady as she showed him drawings, one of her holding hands with her dad under a rainbow, and another of all three of them together, with wings, because angels always come in groups. And while she talked, in small breaths and gentle pauses, her father sat on the other side clutching her teddy bear like it was life itself, and the nurse quietly turned up the oxygen as if she too was fighting fate with tiny gestures. Hours passed in a haze of whispered stories and weak giggles, and Adrian felt each minute sharpening the inevitable, the room thick with love and dread. And when Lila asked for a fairy tale, he read one, not from a book but from his heart, telling her a story about a brave princess who went to the stars to heal sick angels and promised to come back as sunshine every morning. And she listened with glassy eyes, fingers curled around his sleeve, whispering, "I like that world." And he choked as he answered, "It's real for you." And then, without warning, she looked between him and her father and said with a clarity too pure for the dying, "Don't forget each other when I go nap forever." And her father broke again, collapsing into silent sobs against her blanket while Adrian held her hand like he was anchoring her to earth by sheer will. But afternoon sunlight gave way to evening shadows and monitors began to beep slower, like time itself was exhaling. And suddenly she grew quiet, eyes fluttering, voice faint as frost melting. "Mommy's calling! She says the rainbow is ready." And her father whispered, shattered, "Baby, please, please wait." But she smiled a tiny, brave smile, placing both their hands together on her chest as if sealing a bond, whispering, "No one lonely. Promise." And Adrian felt something rip inside him, a wound deeper than business loss. Deeper than his mother's funeral. Deeper than all the years he pretended nothing could touch him. Because this tiny warrior was giving him her final command, to take care of a heart that would drown without a hand to hold. And he nodded, tears streaming, voice shaking, "We promise, Lila." And in the next breath the world held still, machines stilled, her fingers loosened, and her head tilted gently to one side like she had found peace at last. And the room filled with a silence so absolute it hurt to breathe. Her father collapsed into Adrian's chest like a storm breaking against stone, and they clung to each other as nurses closed curtains and straightened blankets and placed a single butterfly sticker on her pillow, the hospital's quiet symbol for a soul who had flown. And Adrian stayed even when the staff left, when her father's sobs quieted to exhausted trembling, when night came and shadows softened the room into memory. Afterward, there were papers, condolences, a tiny white coffin that felt like a crime. But Adrian never left the father alone. Standing beside him through every step, the bewildering funeral planning, the unbearable goodbye, the moment he placed a small unicorn beside her tiny hands, and when it was over and mourners faded away like weak echoes, Adrian led the father outside where winter sun warmed the ground and simply said, "You are not alone." And those words weren't charity or pity, but truth. A vow forged in sterile corridors and held hands and a child's final wish. In the weeks that followed, Adrian didn't return to board meetings or private jets. He brought meals to the grieving home, listened when silence was too heavy, learned how grief looks different each day, sometimes rage, sometimes emptiness. sometimes a faint smile when remembering fairy lights and paper crowns, and slowly, painfully, they built a rhythm. Two men bound not by blood but by love for a little girl who believed broken hearts could heal together. And one quiet morning months later, as spring sunlight warmed the park wall,